On the line with us, distinguished professor of meteorology, the director of the Earth Systems Science Center at Penn State University, the author of Dire Predictions, Understanding Climate Change, second edition, and the Hockey Stick Wars, as I recall. Dr. Michael Mann is back with us. Dr. Mann, welcome back.
Thanks, Tom. It's always good to be with you.
What's the title of your book about the climate wars?
Oh, it's the Hockey Stick and the Climate Wars.
There you go.
Dispatches from the Front Lines.
Dispatches from the Front Lines. A brilliant, brilliant book. There's weird stuff going on with this Congressman, Lamar Smith, who heads up the House Science Committee.
Yeah.
And can you tell us what's going on here? It seems like it's the most underreported story in America right now.
It is, and some people have called it sort of worse than Benghazi in terms of sort of the stance that our current Congress, our current Republican congressional leadership has taken with respect to matters of science. They've politicized science in some ways that's even more extreme than their politicization of our national security, and they are led by a climate change denier, Lamar Smith, a Republican from Texas, who is one of the largest recipients of fossil fuel money in the U.S. Congress, and he has used, many would say abused, his authority as the chair of the House Science Committee to, in fact, engage in attacks against science. So some have, on occasion I've argued that maybe for the time being we should be calling this the House anti-science community, because they are indeed, the leadership are antagonistic when it comes to matters of science, especially findings of science that clash with the interests of the powerful vested interests who fund their campaigns, in this case the fossil fuel industry. And so Lamar Smith has tried to change the way the National Science Foundation funds scientific research so that there is a direct involvement by Congress in deciding what science gets funded and what doesn't.
So science becomes political?
He has attempted to engage in open-ended fishing expeditions and what some would call witch hunts against scientists, climate scientists, who have spoken out about the threat of climate change. And the latest act, he is going after NOAA. He is targeting NOAA scientists with the threat of a subpoena because he doesn't like the results of their peer-reviewed research that shows that global warming is real and that it proceeds apace, and that we continue to see more and more extreme impacts of climate change.
This is sort of like Lois Lerner at the IRS. I mean, you've got a woman now, she has been completely cleared. She was just totally doing her job. And her job was to say, are these applications for nonprofit status legitimate or not, basically? And she had flagged both Tea Party and liberal groups. Right. And there was just such a much larger number of Tea Party groups that were trying to start that a larger number of them were on hold while they were being evaluated. But there was no there in terms of anything she did wrong. She was just a bureaucrat working for the Internal Revenue Service. And when the Republicans after Fox News basically turned her into the villain, the Republicans in Congress dragged her before Congress. She had to go out and hire lawyers. I mean, this destroyed this woman's life.
Right.
And that's what they're trying to do to scientists?
It is. And, there's an irony here, because 10 years ago, I was under a very similar assault by Joe Barton, the now infamous for his apology to BP. After they spilled all that petroleum into our Gulf of Mexico, he felt we should apologize to them.
Right, I remember.
And of course, Barton, again, one of the largest recipients of fossil fuel money in the U.S. Congress at the time, he was chairing the House Energy and Commerce Committee, and he attempted to subject me to a subpoena in an effort to discredit this iconic hockey stick graph that we published a decade and a half ago. It became a potent symbol in the climate change debate, and in an attempt to discredit that result, in an attempt to discredit me as a means of calling into question concerns about climate change, he engaged in a very similar open-ended fishing expedition, tried to subject me to a congressional subpoena. And here's the irony. The biggest hero in the story turns out to have been another Republican. It was Sherwood Boehlert, who was an old school pro-science, pro-environment Republican from upstate New York who chaired the House Science Committee. And Boehlert fiercely called out his fellow Republican, stopping just short of accusing him of engaging in modern-day McCarthyism. And back then, we really had, we had figures like Sherwood Boehlert within the Republican Party who were willing to stand up to this anti-science faction, this growing anti-science faction. I fear that we don't have nearly as much of that now. And here, in this case, it's actually the chair of the House Science Committee who is going after the scientists.
Wow. So it used to be that the chair of the committee, even though he's a Republican, defended science. Now the chair of the committee, a Republican, is attacking science. What happens as a scientist when you get a subpoena from Congress? What does that do to your life, personally and professionally?
I think it's intended, first of all, to send a signal to other scientists that this too will happen to you if you dare speak out about the threat of an issue like climate change that challenges the vested interests who fund our campaigns. I think it's meant to do that. I think it's meant to take you off your game. It's meant to distract you. It's meant to make your life as miserable as possible again, because that sends a message then to your colleagues, right? That this is someplace you don't want to go because this will happen to you just like it had happened to Mike Mann. And so I think it's intended to make it difficult for you to do your job. Often the same sort of interest groups will try to drum up sort of outrage against you via nasty editorials and commentaries on the conservative media. They'll try to pressure your institution to fire you. They will post your name on websites that are typically aimed at sort of firing up a certain rabble, generating outrage against scientists so that you will be subject to nasty letters and emails and phone calls and threats against your life and threats against my family. And I describe all of those experiences that I've had in my book, The Hockey Stick and the Climate Wars. All those experiences that I've had because I dared publish this graph a decade and a half ago. And as a result of that iconic graph, I have found myself, subject to all sorts of attacks of this sort for, a decade and a half now. And ultimately, I've embraced that. It's provided me an opportunity to actually participate in this very important discussion. And so it wasn't what I signed up for, but I welcome the opportunity it's brought. But, I really worry about my fellow scientists who haven't developed a thick skin, don't have the experience to deal with these sorts of attacks, and they're being subject to the same sorts of things.
Right. We should set up a support group.
Well, there is. There's the climate, believe it or not, and it will shock you that it's even necessary that it exists, but there is a climate science legal defense fund now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. 4 scientists who have been attacked. This is absolutely extraordinary. We are talking with Dr. Michael Mann, literally one of the world's leading climate scientists, distinguished professor of meteorology, director of the Earth Systems Science Center at Penn State, author of Dire Predictions, Understanding Climate Change, and The Hockey Stick and the Climate Wars. Dr. Mann, thanks so much for dropping by and sharing with us what's going on.
Thank you, Tom. Always a pleasure.
It is always great talking with you. It's shocking stuff.